Hello and welcome to History Bubble, Bahamas Part 2. Last episode we saw the Bahamas being depopulated by the Spanish from abduction and diseases. So while being in the Spanish sphere for the first century of European expansion into the Americas, the Bahamian Islands were mostly left alone other than for raids to capture the locals. It was until the 1640s until new residents were to inhabit the islands. A group of British settlers on Bermuda saw need to have the heretics of the island find a new place where they could practice their religion in peace, which preferably would be a new island. And as Britain a few years earlier had expressed a small interest in the Bahamian Islands, they chose to go there. So a group of around 70 settlers set sail to the Bahamas and start building up a colony in what most likely Eleuthera. But their establishment on the islands was not as happy as most of them had expected, as internal conflicts, the poor soil, and the Spanish drove many away from the colony. But the colony still managed to keep itself alive, and a few decades later a new one was established from Bermuda, but this time on New Providence. Many of those who eventually left became appointed to high position in South Carolina and tried to draw eyes towards the Bahamas. Because of this, the islands got appointed a more formal government, but this new administration did not take great interest in developing the colony, and thus it fell to piracy, which mainly targeted Spanish ships who, in retaliation, attacked the Bahamas in frequent raids, tempering the development even further. But when the islands eventually got a real administration, things were slowly starting to get better, and a parliamentary government was created in the colony. But the fight against the pirates was slow, since piracy was the most profitable profession in the small islands with worthless soil, and what little progress could be made was quenched by the Spanish and French in retribution for piracy. The fight against piracy continued, but even with the intervention from the king, little was changed. Eventually, the problem became such a thorn in Britain's side, decided to take the direct control of the colony. The goal was to exterminate the pirates and bring stability to the islands, once and for all. The commission was sent with an elite group of soldiers, who on arrival got 1,000 pirates to surrender, given a pardon, while many of those who did not were hanged. These strict disciplinary measures saw almost immediate effect, and piracy in the islands were on the downturn. But after they governed their own internal affairs, now that the problems, for the most part, had been dealt with, which was granted 10 years after Britain had taken direct control again granted. The assembly was formed, and was from then on able to manage the colony on its own for its lifetime, other than a few interruptions from war. One of these interruptions occurred during the American Independence War, where the US Navy captured Nassau for the remainder of the war, only to try to give it to Spain after the conflict. Once it was over, Britain managed to retake control of the colony, which was officialized in the peace treaty for the war. The war also brought many British loyalists to the Bahamas after the end of the conflict, and these new colonists also brought their slaves, and the population increased by a huge amount from this development. The new settlers tried to continue their old ways of cotton plantation, but this destroyed the already fragile soil of many of the Bahamian Islands. This made the already horrid condition of the slaves in many cases even worse, and numerous slave revolts occurred on the islands. So hope came to the slaves when Britain abolished slavery, but conditions did not improve much for them by the passing of this law, and it took another 50 years for the full emancipation to be enacted on the islands, and even then the former slaves continued to live in horrid conditions. Many lived through subsistence farming, while others continued to work in squalid conditions for the former masters. There were almost no trade in or out to the island until the American Civil War, where the Bahamian ships slipped through the blockade to sell goods and make profit. They also sold a lot of liquor to the Americans during Prohibition, but these measures were only temporary. There were many attempts to try to find something for the Bahamas to trade, but the poor soil made most ventures unprofitable. But after World War II, a tourism industry was established in the country, and which could for the first time start a real economic growth in the islands. The end of the war also started a wave of anti-colonialism, around the world and opened up a possibility for Bahamian independence. But how that will go, we'll have to explore in the next and last episode of History Bubble, the Bahamas. Hope to see you then.